Every time something strange appears in the sky, we look to NASA. We expect from them the clearest images, the first explanations, the true story. That's how it's supposed to work, right? They have the biggest telescopes, the best instruments, the cleanest data. But this time, something broke. The sharpest, most detailed images of Three-Eyed Atlas did not come from NASA. They came from amateurs. From backyard observatories, from people who spend nights stacking hundreds of frames on their home computers. And paradoxically, it is on their shots that details absent from official releases come to light. And that's strange. NASA has equipment worth billions of dollars. These folks have consumer-grade cameras and endless patience. Yet it is they who show us clear frontal jets, defined structures, and a bright, consistent nucleus that appears frame after frame. I'm not claiming NASA is hiding something, but the question asks itself. If Three-Eyed Atlas is just an ordinary interstellar comet, then why do the clearest details only emerge from independent processing? Why are the official previews blurry, low contrast, and lacking the very features everyone wants to study? And while all this is happening, another object, C/2014 UN271, is moving through the outer solar system. A giant 150 kilometers wide, awakening from its slumber farther from the sun than almost any comet we know. Together, these two objects create a quiet, uneasy feeling. If nothing unusual is happening, then why aren't we seeing everything there is to see? When the first amateur shots of Atlas began circulating online, many were surprised, not because they looked strange, but because they looked better than NASA's. Backyard telescopes, small observatories, off-the-shelf cameras, and yet they provided clearer, sharper frames than the official releases, and that alone is cause for concern. NASA has billion-dollar instruments. These people have dark skies, patience, and processing skills. But it was the amateurs who showed a defined coma, a clean tail, and most importantly, that very frontal jet pointed forward along the object's motion. Meanwhile, NASA's previews looked washed out, lacking detail, almost as if they were deliberately processed to not highlight anything unusual. This doesn't automatically mean something is being hidden. It could be calibration delays. Or maybe NASA doesn't want to comment until the data is fully cleaned. But if Atlas is just an ordinary comet, then why does all the interesting detail only manifest outside the agency? And why is the presumed nucleus so consistently visible in amateur stacks but not in the official materials? Then there's its trajectory, retrograde but oddly close to the plane of the ecliptic, almost gliding along the same plane used by our own probes. Not impossible, but not what you'd expect from a random guest from another star system. And yet, NASA maintains an almost complete silence, no in-depth explanations, no high-detail follow-up shots, no acknowledgement of the strange jet orientation. This isn't about declaring Atlas artificial, it's about noticing. The clearest information is not coming from those with the best tools. It's coming from amateurs who stumbled upon details that NASA hasn't mentioned at all. And when the official story and independent images don't quite align, people naturally start asking, why? While everyone argues about Atlas, another object is drifting in the outer solar system, quietly turning the situation from an isolated event into a suspicious pattern. C/2014 UN271, aka Bernardinelli Bernstein, is not new. But it remains the best example of how our expectations about what space should look like are cracking. And the reason it's important here is simple. The same strangeness we're observing with Atlas is happening on a completely different scale with UN271. UN271 is monstrously huge, about 150 kilometers in diameter. That's not just a big comet, that's larger than many dwarf planets. If Atlas is a strange, compact guest with a suspiciously focused jet, then UN271 is the sluggish giant challenging our understanding from the opposite flank. And it does so in a no less alarming way. It began showing activity far out near Saturn's orbit, at temperatures where even typical comets should remain frozen blocks. UN271 was already releasing carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and ammonia back then, as if it didn't care about the rules. That in itself is abnormal. But what makes it relevant in this context is the parallel with the Atlas situation. In both cases, the behavior doesn't match the textbooks. With Atlas, it's the strange frontal jet and inconsistent visualization. With UN271, it's a giant object coming to life in a region of space where nothing should be happening at all. Two different objects, two very different scales, but both fall into the category of, this shouldn't be happening, but it is. And again, communication around UN271 hasn't been particularly detailed. No major public breakdowns of its early activity, no real attempt to explain why such a massive object behaves this way. It's as if it was acknowledged once, hey, we found this giant thing, and quietly set aside. Meanwhile, the oddities remain, and the lack of updates leaves many feeling that such unusual behavior is simply being archived in silence instead of becoming a topic for discussion. That's why UN271 matters in a video about Atlas. It shows that unusual behavior in the solar system right now is not an isolated case. When objects so different, one small and interstellar, the other gigantic and ancient, both break the rules in their own ways, it makes the dismissive, nothing to see here attitude feel off-key. Not because there's a hidden conspiracy, but because these events deserve more honest curiosity than they are getting. And if a 150-kilometer object can awaken in the icy void almost without explanation, then perhaps a small interstellar guest with a frontal jet is not as simple or ordinary as some official statements imply. The pattern is the point, and UN271 makes that pattern harder to ignore. Looking at Atlas and UN271 side by side, it's hard not to notice a forming pattern. Two unusual objects appear almost simultaneously and behave in ways we don't expect. One is small, fast, and suspiciously structured. The other is gigantic, ancient, and awakening where comets should remain frozen and silent. And the timing feels non-random. For most of human history, we didn't detect a single interstellar visitor. Then there was Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019. Now, three-eyed Atlas in 2025. Three objects in less than a decade after centuries of nothing. Maybe it's just better technology. Maybe they were always flying by and we were blind. But many astronomers note in private conversations the same thing. This many arrivals so close together is not what we predicted. And this is where transparency comes to the forefront. Because when NASA publishes soft, non-detailed images of Atlas while amateurs demonstrate clear structures, people notice. When UN271 starts behaving like a comet long before comets are supposed to wake up, people notice that too. These things do not automatically mean something unnatural is happening, but they definitely mean something unusual is happening. And pretending everything is normal only makes the situation worse. Some researchers say the solar system might be drifting through a denser region of the galaxy. Others think we're finally just seeing what was always there. And, of course, some allow for more exotic possibilities. Fragments of ancient technology, debris from forgotten civilizations we will never meet. No one claims this is the case, but it's also true that no one can completely rule it out. What is certain is this: when two such strange objects appear almost simultaneously, and the clearest details come from people outside the institutions we rely on, it forces us to step back and ask bigger questions. Not, is it aliens, but something more grounded. Do we actually understand what is moving through our solar system, and are we being shown everything we need to understand it? Because maybe everything is natural. Maybe it all fits a pattern we just haven't recognized yet. Or maybe the silence, the gaps, and the selective publications are part of a story we are only beginning to notice. Either way, the sky doesn't care which explanations we prefer. The objects are here. They behave as they behave. And the more we observe them, the more it seems our picture of the solar system is missing a few pieces. Soon, both Atlas and UN271 will disappear from view, and attention to them will fade. But the questions they raised will not vanish with them. Because this whole situation wouldn't seem so strange if the information matched. If NASA's shots were as clear as the amateurs, if the details formed a coherent picture, if nothing seemed filtered. But that's not what's happening. The clearest frames of Atlas come from ordinary people with telescopes in their backyards, not from the agency with billion-dollar tools. And when these independent images have features missing from the official releases, it's natural for people to wonder, why? UN271 adds fuel to the fire, a giant object active where it shouldn't be, but barely discussed. Not hidden, but definitely not given the attention such an unusual phenomenon deserves. Two different objects, both behaving unexpectedly and both surrounded by a kind of quiet, selective communication. None of this proves artificiality, but it clearly shows that our understanding is not keeping up with what we observe, and the explanations do not address the essence of the strangeness. People are asking questions, reasonable questions. So before these objects dissolve into the darkness, it's worth taking a closer look. Because even if everything is natural, it still is not ordinary. And pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone understand what is really happening up there. We stand on the threshold of a new era of space observation. Technology has become accessible to millions. A dark sky and patience can now compete with the budgets of government agencies in the task of visualization. The Atlas story is not an anomaly, but a precedent. It demonstrates a shift. The truth can be born not in the center, but on the periphery, in a garage, on a roof, in a field. This changes the rules of the game. The next strange object will be photographed, processed, and analyzed by independent observers faster than large organizations can draft a press release. This is not a threat to science, it is its democratization. But it is also a challenge for these organizations. Because in an era where everyone can be a herald of the sky, silence or incoherence sounds louder than ever. Atlas and UN271 are not the end of the story. They are the first chapters of a new one. Chapters in which the public becomes not just a passive viewer, but an active participant in deciphering the cosmos. And this, perhaps, is the most important message hidden behind all these pixels and jets. The future of astronomy will be collaborative, whether we like it or not. And how the major players respond to this challenge, whether they continue building walls of silence or begin an open dialogue, will determine who we ultimately believe, the official narrative or the testimony of our own eyes. If you're still here, if your curiosity is still alive, that is the most important thing. Because space does not tell its stories to those who do not want to listen. Leave a like if you believe celestial anomalies deserve more than polite silence. Subscribe so you don't miss the moment the next mystery appears in the frame. The next visitor may not give us much time to think. Let's be ready.